The night descends quietly. There is a city in Japan that was the capital of the country for 150 years and then stopped being the capital and never recovered. The court went back to Kyoto. The power went to Edo. And Kamakura was left with its temples and its hills and its specific quality of a place that was once the center of everything, and has been living with that memory ever since. It does not seem diminished by this. If anything, it seems relieved. If these stories bring you peace, consider subscribing. And now let us begin. You are walking through a tunnel of trees. The specific tunnel that the approach to Tsurugaoka Hachimangu creates. The Zelkova trees that line the central avenue of Kamakura. Planted in rows on either side of the path that leads from the sea to the great shrine, their branches meeting overhead in the specific way that old trees meet when they have been growing toward each other for long enough. The light through the canopy. The specific quality of arriving somewhere through a passage that has been preparing you for what is at the end of it. Kamakura is like this. A city that has to be arrived at. Not a city you find yourself in casually. You are specifically here, specifically walking this specific path, because Kamakura is the kind of place that requires the intention to be in it. The train from Tokyo takes about an hour. The mountains that surround the city on 3 sides and the sea that closes the 4th side give it a specific character of enclosure, of being within something, of being held by the landscape, in a way that the open cities of the Kanto Plain are not held. This enclosure is not accidental, it was strategic. Minamoto no Yoritomo chose Kamakura in 1180 as the base from which he would conduct the Genpei War, the conflict between the Minamoto and Taira clans that would determine who governed Japan. He chose it because the mountains made it defensible. The narrow passes, the kiridoshi, the cut passes that were carved through the hills, each one defensible by a small force against a much larger one, gave the city a natural military advantage that open ground could not provide. The choice was brilliant. The Minamoto won the war. Yoritomo established the Kamakura shogunate in 1192, the first shogunate in Japanese history, the specific governmental form in which a military commander rules in the name of the emperor, a form that would govern Japan for almost 700 years across 3 different shogunates. Kamakura was the first capital of this new form of government. Not Kyoto, where the emperor and the court and the cultural life of the aristocracy continued as it had always continued. Kamakura, the military capital, the city of warriors, the specific place where the new power organized itself. This specific character, the military capital, the city of warriors who had taken power from the court and who organized their rule around different values than the court had organized its rule around, shaped everything that Kamakura became. The temples of Kamakura are not the temples of Kyoto. Not in spirit, not in character, not in the specific relationship they have to the people who built them and the people who visit them. The temples of Kyoto are the temples of the aristocratic tradition, elaborate, refined, connected to the specific aesthetic culture of the Heian court that had been developing for centuries. The famous gardens, the famous tea rooms, the specific beauty that a culture obsessed with beauty and with the performance of beauty produces. The temples of Kamakura are the temples of warriors, built by people who had spent their lives in violence and who came to the Buddhist tradition not as an aesthetic luxury, but as a specific grappling with the reality that their lives produced. The Zen tradition, which arrived in Japan in the late 12th and 13th centuries, precisely when Kamakura was at the height of its power, found its natural home here, among the warriors who needed a practice that was as direct and as unadorned as the life they led. Zen does not accommodate ornament. It does not accommodate the specific kind of distance from direct experience that the elaborate aesthetics of the court tradition maintained. It insists on the direct encounter, with the breath, with the moment, with what is actually here, stripped of everything that is not here. This insistence was what the warriors of Kamakura needed, not the beauty of the court. They had taken power from the court precisely because they were not of the court and did not need its specific kind of beauty. They needed something that met them where they were. Zen met them where they were. And Kamakura became the center of Zen practice in Japan. A position it still holds, centuries after the shogunate moved to Kyoto, and then Edo, centuries after the specific military culture that Zen had served had transformed itself into something that neither Zen nor the warriors who practiced it would recognize. The temples are still here, built into the hills of the specific landscape that Yoritomo chose for its defensibility. Still practicing what they have always practiced, the direct encounter with the breath, with the moment, with what is actually here, the great Buddha. If there is a single image that most people carry when they think of Kamakura, it is the great Buddha. The Kotoku-in Daibutsu, the enormous bronze figure of Amida Buddha that sits in the open air on the western side of the city, in the specific valley between the hills that the statue has occupied since the 13th century. 13.5 meters tall, weighing approximately 93 tons. Seated in the lotus position with the specific hand gesture of meditation. The hands resting in the lap, palms upward, the left hand supporting the right, the thumbs touching to form a specific oval that is one of the most ancient and most widely recognized gestures in the Buddhist tradition. The statue was cast in bronze between 1252 and 1253, during the Kamakura period when the city was still the center of Japanese governance. It was originally housed in a large wooden hall, the specific kind of hall that the Todaiji Great Buddha has always been housed in, the enormous wooden structure built to contain the figure. The hall was destroyed by typhoons, by the specific storms that arrive from the Pacific, and that the mountains of the Kamakura region partially shelter the city from but cannot entirely stop. The hall was rebuilt. It was destroyed again. It was rebuilt again. Then, in 1498, a tsunami generated by a large earthquake swept through the city and destroyed the hall for the last time. The hall was not rebuilt. The statue was left in the open air, where it has sat ever since, through every typhoon, through every earthquake, through the specific accumulation of weather and time that the open-air location has subjected it to for more than 500 years. The statue sits, unchanged, not unchanged. The surface has aged, the specific patina of 5 centuries of exposure to the specific weather of Kamakura has developed, but seated, in the same position, with the same expression, with the same specific quality of presence that the person who commissioned it in 1252 intended it to have. The hall fell, the storms came, the tsunami arrived. The statue sat. This persistence, the specific quality of something that has remained what it is through everything that has tried to change it, is one of the first things that people who visit the Kamakura Daibutsu describe. Not the size, though the size is impressive. Not the artistry, though the artistry is remarkable. The presence. the specific quality of something that has been here for a very long time and intends to continue. You walk up the approach. The statue comes into view. Something in you becomes quiet. Not because you have been told it should, because the specific presence of the thing, the specific combination of scale and stillness, and the specific quality of an object that has persisted through everything, produces, in the person who comes to it with any degree of openness, the specific quality of quiet that it has been producing in the people who come to it for 750 years. The hands are in the lap, the eyes are lowered, the thumb tips touch, the specific quality of here, be here, the specific relationship between the warriors of Kamakura and the Buddhist tradition, the specific form that this relationship took in the medieval period, is one of the most interesting intersections of military culture and spiritual practice in Japanese history. Buddhism had been present in Japan since the 6th century. The Buddhist tradition that the Nara and Heian periods had developed. The elaborate, esoteric forms of Buddhism that the court aristocracy had cultivated was magnificent and sophisticated and deeply integrated into the aesthetic and intellectual life of the court. But it was the court's Buddhism, organized around the court's needs, shaped by the court's aesthetic sensibilities, practiced in the specific way that a culture organized around the performance of refinement practices everything, with elaborate ritual, with specific visual grandeur, with the specific kind of distance from direct experience that refinement produces. The warriors who came to power at Kamakura were not the court. They had taken power from the court precisely because the court's way of organizing society had not been adequate to the specific problems that the society faced. They had no particular reason to adopt the court's Buddhism along with the power they had taken. What they needed was different. And Zen, the specific tradition of Buddhism that arrived in Japan in the late 12th century, carried by Japanese monks who had studied in China and by Chinese masters who came at Japanese invitation, was different. Zen made no accommodation for elaboration. The specific practice, zazen, the sitting, the specific sustained encounter with the breath and the moment, required nothing that the warrior did not already have: a body capable of sitting still, a mind willing to be with what was actually present, the specific quality of attention that the warrior had already been developing through years of training, the attention that is required to respond to what is actually happening in combat, rather than to what the mind fears or desires. This attention was what Zen was also developing, through a different practice, in a different context, toward a different but related end. The warriors recognized something. In Zen, they found a practice that was as direct and as unadorned as the life they led. No elaborate ritual, no specific visual grandeur, sitting, breathing. Here. This was Zen. And this was what the warriors needed. The specific figure who most completely embodies the relationship between Kamakura warrior culture and Zen practice is not a warrior, but a monk. Eisai, the Japanese monk who brought the Rinzai Zen tradition from China to Japan in 1191, who established the first Zen temple in Kamakura, and who cultivated the specific relationship between Zen practice and the warrior class that would define both for centuries. Eisai understood the warriors, not because he was one. He was a monk, trained in the specific intellectual and contemplative traditions of Japanese Buddhism, and then in the specific practice of the Chinese Zen tradition. But because he understood what the warriors needed and could see that Zen provided it, he made Zen accessible to the warriors of Kamakura. not by simplifying it. Zen does not accommodate simplification any more than it accommodates elaboration, by presenting it honestly, by showing the warriors what the practice actually required, and what the practice actually produced. They sat, they breathed. They encountered directly what was actually here. The specific quality of what is actually here, encountered directly, without the distortion of fear or desire, or the specific categories that the untrained mind imposes on experience. This is what the practice produces. And this is what the warriors needed. Not peace, in the sense of the absence of conflict. The specific quality of presence that allows effective action in the midst of conflict. The specific quality of the mind that sees clearly what is actually happening rather than what it fears is happening or what it desires is happening. This quality, the specific quality of clear seeing, is what Zen calls Kensho, the seeing of one's nature. And it is what the warriors of Kamakura, through years of sitting in the specific meditation halls of the specific temples that were being built in the hills around their city, were working toward. Some of them found it. In the specific way that these things are found, not by searching, but by sitting with enough consistency and enough genuine attention that the specific quality of clear seeing becomes gradually more available than it was before. The sitting halls are still there, still available, still producing what they have always produced, for whoever comes, with the specific intention of sitting and breathing and being here, the specific urban character of contemporary Kamakura, the city that is also a tourist destination, that receives millions of visitors each year, but that also has a substantial permanent population of people who have chosen to live in this specific combination of temples and hills and sea, is a character that holds the historical and the contemporary in a specific balance that few other cities in Japan quite achieve. The temples are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Great Buddha is one of the most photographed objects in Japan. The hiking trails through the hills are marked and maintained and popular with day trippers from Tokyo. The beaches of Kamakura are among the most popular in the greater Tokyo area. Crowded with surfers in summer, quieter but still visited in the other seasons. All of this contemporary life, the visitors and the surfers and the day trippers and the tourists, exists in the same space as the 800-year-old temples and the specific quiet of the Zen meditation halls and the great Buddha sitting in his valley. They coexist without apparent tension. This is one of the specific qualities of Kamakura, the ability to contain many different things simultaneously without any of them cancelling the others. The tourist looking at the great Buddha and the monk sitting in zazen in the meditation hall behind the tourist are both at Kamakura. The surfer riding the waves that the Pacific sends to the Kamakura beach and the scholar studying the manuscripts of the medieval shogunate in the quiet of the Kamakura Museum are both at Kamakura. The city contains all of it, as the hills contain the city, as the sea opens at the city's edge, as the great Buddha sits in the valley, containing everything, being contained by nothing. This is what 750 years of sitting in the hills above the Pacific produces, the capacity to hold without being held, to contain everything, while being free. The specific landscape of Kamakura, the hills that surround the city on three sides, the sea that closes the south, the narrow passes through the hills that were once the military choke points of the medieval capital, is a landscape that has shaped everything that happened here, and that continues to shape the experience of being here. The kiridoshi, the cut passes, the specific passages through the hills that the Kamakura warriors carved to control access to their city, Not natural passes, but deliberately cut. The specific act of engineering that took a landscape that was already defensible and made it more so. Each kiridoshi was narrow enough that attackers could only pass through in small numbers, making even a large attacking force manageable by a small defending force at the right position. There are several of these passes still accessible in Kamakura. The Keiwezaka Kiridoshi, the Gokurakuji Kiridoshi. Others that the hiking trails of the city's wooded hills still pass through. Walking through them today, you walk through spaces that have not changed in any significant way since they were cut in the 12th and 13th centuries. The specific width of the cut, the specific quality of the stone walls on either side, the specific overhead of the narrowing that makes you aware of your own width as you pass through. These are not dramatic spaces. They are not the grand entrances of the famous castles. They are functional military engineering, cuts through rock just wide enough to allow passage, just narrow enough to allow defense. Their power is not visual, it is tactical. The person standing inside the kiridoshi understands immediately and physically what the warriors of Kamakura understood about why this landscape was chosen. You cannot simply arrive in Kamakura, you have to pass through. The specific Zen temples of Kamakura, the temples of the Rinzai Zen tradition that found its natural home in this military city, are arranged through the hills in a specific configuration. The Kamakura Gozan, the 5 great Zen temples of Kamakura, Kenchoji, Engakuji, Jufukuji, Jochiji, and Jomyoji, were ranked in a formal hierarchy during the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, a hierarchy that organized the relationship between the temples and the shogunate that supported them. Kenchoji is first among the 5, founded in 1253 during the height of the Kamakura shogunate by the Chinese monk Langxi Daolong, known in Japan as Rankei Doryu, who came to Japan at the invitation of the 5th regent of the shogunate, Hōjō Tokimune. The invitation itself is significant. The regent of the most powerful military government in Japan specifically invited a Chinese Zen master to come to Kamakura and establish a temple. This was not a casual cultural gesture. It was a specific statement about the relationship between military governance and Buddhist practice that the Kamakura shogunate wanted to establish. The rulers of Kamakura understood Zen as a practice that served their specific needs as warriors and as governors. Not as a decorative addition to the cultural life of the city, as a fundamental practice for the specific kind of person who held power in Kamakura. The practice of sitting, of zazen, the seated meditation that is the core practice of the Zen tradition, is not comfortable, not initially. The specific physical demands of sitting correctly, of maintaining the specific posture that the practice requires, of remaining still through the specific discomfort that stillness produces in bodies that are more accustomed to movement. These demands are real and they are sustained. But the warriors who practiced zazen at Kenchoji and the other Kamakura Zen temples were not people who were easily deterred by discomfort. They were people who had trained their bodies to withstand the specific discomforts of combat, the cold, the heat, the physical strain of armor and weapons, and the specific violence of medieval Japanese warfare. The specific discomfort of zazen was a different kind of challenge, but it was a challenge they were equipped to meet. What Zen offered the warriors was something that the specific culture of violence they inhabited required, but did not provide. A way of being fully present to what was actually happening, without the distortion of fear or desire. Fear is the specific problem of the warrior, the fear of death, which is always present and which, if it dominates the mind, makes effective action impossible. The warrior who acts from fear acts badly. The warrior who can be fully present to the situation, who can see what is actually happening without the distortion of what they fear might happen, acts effectively. Zen is the practice of this presence, not the suppression of fear. The specific quality of attention that allows what is actually happening to be seen clearly, whether fear is present or not. The warriors of Kamakura practiced this in the training hall. They practiced it in combat. They practiced it in the specific seated stillness of zazen. The same practice, different forms. The specific quality of full presence, without distortion, without addition, without the overlay of what the mind fears or desires. Simply what is here. Engakuji, the second of the 5 great temples, founded in 1282 by the 8th regent Hōjō Tokimune, who had just led Japan through the Mongol invasions, the 2 attempted invasions of Japan by the forces of Kublai Khan, in 1274 and 1281, that represented the most serious external military threat that Japan had faced in its history. The second invasion in 1281 was enormous. A combined Mongol and Korean and Chinese force of perhaps 140,000 men in a fleet of thousands of ships landing on the coast of Kyushu. The Kamakura samurai who opposed this force were vastly outnumbered. The specific fighting that took place on the Kyushu beaches. The samurai who had been trained in a tradition of individual combat, facing a Mongol army that fought in coordinated formations, using tactics the Japanese had not encountered, was brutal and difficult. And then the typhoon came. The specific storm that the Japanese would call the kamikaze, the divine wind, destroyed the Mongol fleet in the harbor. The ships that had carried the 140,000 men were sunk or damaged. The invasion force, cut off from resupply and withdrawal, was destroyed. Japan was not invaded. Tokimune had led the defense. He had maintained the morale of the Japanese forces through 2 separate invasions, and the specific difficulty of fighting an enemy that fought in ways Japan had not prepared for. He was 34 years old during the second invasion. He had been regent since he was 18. He founded Engakuji in 1282 to pray for the souls of everyone who had died in the Mongol invasions, both the Japanese who had died defending Japan and the Mongols who had died invading it. Both. He prayed for both. This is the specific quality of the Zen perspective that Tokimune had absorbed through years of practice. Not the perspective that divides the world into the good and the bad, the worthy and the unworthy, the people worth mourning and the people not worth mourning. The perspective that recognizes in everyone who dies the same basic fact of death. The enemy died. They died too. Pray for them. Engakuji was founded in this spirit. It is still here, still practicing what it has always practiced, still receiving whoever comes with whatever they are carrying. The specific sound of Engakuji, the sound that the temple's most famous object produces, is worth attending to separately. The ogane, the great bell of Engakuji, is one of the 3 great bells of Japan. Cast in 1301, it weighs approximately 3,500 kilograms. Its diameter at the rim is approximately 2.5 meters. It hangs in a dedicated belfry at the top of a flight of stone steps above the main temple precinct. The bell is rung at New Year. It is rung on certain special occasions. When it rings, the specific sound it produces the specific low resonance of a very large bronze bell, a sound that is felt in the chest as much as heard by the ear, that moves through the body rather than simply reaching the ear, is audible across a significant area of the Kamakura Hills. 700 years. The same bell, the same sound. Moving through the same hills, the hills hold the sound the way they have always held it. The specific resonance of a bell cast in 1301 ringing in the hills of Kamakura in the 21st century is one of the most complete forms of time travel available in Japan. You are here. The bell sounds. The sound is 700 years old. You receive it in your chest, in your body, directly. The specific path that connects Kita-Kamakura Station to the great temples of the northern part of the city, the specific sequence of walking that the hikers and the pilgrims and the ordinary visitors who come to Kamakura on a weekday morning take through the woods between the temples, is one of the most beautiful short walks in Japan. The path enters the woods behind Engakuji, the specific deciduous forest of the Kamakura Hills, Zelkova and cedar, and the specific understory of the temperate forest of this part of Japan, creates an immediate transition from the sounds of the station and the road to the sounds of the forest. The birds, the specific quality of the forest floor, the accumulated leaf fall of years, the specific softness of the ground under the feet in the places where the leaves have composted into the dark soil that forest floors accumulate. The light filtered through the canopy in the specific way that deciduous forest filters light in the specific season you are walking through it. Spring, the specific pale green of the new leaves, the light so young that it has not yet acquired the darker quality of summer. Everything bright and tentative and new. Summer, the dense green canopy, the specific coolness of the forest compared to the heat outside it, the specific sound of insects. Autumn, the specific color change of the deciduous forest, each species at its own pace, the maples the last to turn and the most dramatic when they do. Winter, the bare branches, the specific quality of the winter light that reaches the forest floor unobstructed, the specific cold quality of the air under the leafless trees. Each season, each walk, the path is the same. The experience is not. The temples appear along the path, not announced, present. The specific approach to each temple, the stone steps, the gate, the transition from the forest path to the temple precinct, prepared by the walk prepared by the previous temple, the sequence of the path and the temples, creating a specific cumulative experience that is different from visiting any single temple in isolation. By the time you reach Kenchoji, you have been prepared, not instructed. Prepared by the walk, by the specific quality of the forest and the hills and the sequence of smaller temples that came before. The largest of the Kamakura Zen temples receives you in the specific state that the path has produced, and the specific quality of the encounter between the person who has been walking through the Kamakura Hills and the 750-year-old temple that is at the end of the walk is different from the encounter that would have happened if you had driven to the parking lot. You are here. The path made you ready to be here. The temple receives you. The sea at Kamakura, the specific sea that closes the southern boundary of the city, the Sagami Bay, the specific inlet of the Pacific that the Miura Peninsula and the Izu Peninsula create between them, the sea that the beaches of Kamakura face directly, the sea that the warriors of the medieval shogunate looked out at from the city they had built in the hills. The sea at Kamakura is different from the sea at other beach cities because of what is behind it. Behind the narrow strip of beach and the town and the flat land where the town sits, the hills rise immediately. The enclosure of the hills and the openness of the sea create a specific quality of contrast. The city held between two different scales of geography, the intimate containment of the hills and the infinite openness of the Pacific. Standing on the beach at Kamakura and looking south, there is nothing between you and the horizon but water. Standing on the beach at Kamakura and looking north, the hills rise immediately behind the city, covered in the specific forest of the Kamakura hills, the temples visible in their valleys and on their slopes. This contrast, the infinite and the intimate, the ocean and the hills, is the specific geography that Yoritomo chose, not only for its defensibility, for its character. The city between the hills and the sea has a specific quality of being at a boundary. Not the boundary between land and water. Every coastal city is at that boundary. The boundary between the contained and the infinite. Between the world of human organization, the shogunate, the temples, the political and military structures that the warriors of Kamakura built, and the specific world beyond organization, the specific world that the Pacific represents, beyond the horizon, beyond the capacity of any human institution to control. The warriors looked at both every day, the organization they had built, the horizon beyond which their organization ended. This double awareness of what can be organized and what cannot is one of the specific gifts of the Kamakura location. And it is one of the gifts that the Zen tradition, which was so central to the life of Kamakura, specifically cultivates. Zen is not the practice of building better organizations. It is the practice of knowing what organization cannot reach, of being present to the specific quality of experience that exists beyond the categories and the structures and the specific forms of control that human consciousness loves to impose. The sea is beyond the structures. The practice of sitting, of zazen, of the specific stillness that the Zen tradition requires, is the practice of being present to what is beyond the structures. Not the sea specifically, the quality of experience that the sea represents, the quality that is there when the categories and the structures and the specific forms of mental organization that the mind produces have been temporarily set aside. The warriors of Kamakura sat in their temples in the hills. They looked at the sea. They sat with both. The Kamakura period ended. Not dramatically, not in a single decisive battle or a sudden political reversal. The specific decline of the Kamakura shogunate was a gradual process, the specific erosion of authority that any governing system undergoes when the conditions that produced it change. The Mongol invasions were the beginning. The enormous cost of defending against the invasions, the financial cost of mobilizing the forces, of maintaining the coastal defenses, of rewarding the warriors who had fought, was a cost that the shogunate struggled to bear. The warriors who had fought expected the specific rewards that the warrior tradition specified: land, goods, the tangible material recognition that their service deserved. The shogunate could not provide these rewards adequately. The Mongols had not been defeated in battle in the conventional sense. They had been dispersed by typhoons, which meant that there was no conquered territory to distribute, no enemy wealth to redistribute as reward. The warriors who had risked their lives and their resources received less than they had expected. They remembered. The specific resentment of people who have given much and received little is a specific and durable resentment. It does not dissipate. It accumulates. And in 1333, when Go-Daigo, the emperor, who had been working to restore imperial rule from the shogunate's control, raised a military force to challenge the Kamakura government, enough of the warriors who had reason to resent the shogunate joined the challenge to make it decisive. The Kamakura shogunate fell. The last regent of Kamakura, Hōjō Takatoki, retreated to the Toshoji temple in Kamakura and died there in the specific form of death that the warrior tradition specified for those who faced irreversible defeat, seppuku, the act of self-determination that the warrior tradition treated as the specific form of death that preserved honor when survival was not possible. 870 people died with him. The shogunate was over. Kamakura was no longer the capital. The power moved first to Kyoto, then eventually to Edo. Kamakura was left with its hills and its temples and its sea, and the specific memory of what it had been. And it found, in this remaining, the specific quality that it still has. The city that was once everything and that became, through the loss of the specific things that made it everything, something more quietly and more deeply itself. The temples remained, the hills remained, the sea remained, the great Buddha remained, exposed now to the weather of the open air, the hall that had housed it gone, sitting in the specific valley that the hills provide, receiving whoever comes. And people kept coming, not because Kamakura was the capital, because Kamakura was Kamakura, the specific combination of the temples and the hills and the sea, and the specific quality of a place that has been practicing a specific kind of attention for 800 years. The attention that the Zen tradition cultivates, the attention that the warrior tradition needed, the attention that the specific geography of Kamakura, the hills behind and the sea in front, the enclosure and the infinite together, naturally produces. The city that has been practicing attention for 800 years. Still practicing. Still receiving whoever comes. The specific quality of Kamakura at the end of the day. When the day visitors have returned to their trains, and the city has settled into itself, is the quality of a place that does not depend on being visited to be what it is. The temples close their main gates. The beach empties. The city quiets. But the hills are still there. The specific dark of the forested hills around the city. The specific quality of the night sky that the hills and the absence of tall buildings produces. Not the full dark of the countryside, but quieter than Tokyo. Closer to the specific quality of a sky that still has some darkness left in it. And the sea is still there. The specific sound of the Pacific reaching the Kamakura beach. The specific rhythm of the waves, which is different from the rhythm of the enclosed sea of the Seto Inland Sea, which is different again from the river sounds that inland cities have instead of ocean sounds. The Pacific arrives at Kamakura's beach in the specific way it always arrives. Not caring about the day or the night, not caring about the city that has been built above the beach, not caring about the shogunate that chose this location 800 years ago for its strategic position. The Pacific arrives, as it has always arrived, before the shogunate, during the shogunate, after the shogunate. The waves break on the beach, the hills hold the city, the great Buddha sits in the valley, the hands are in the lap, the thumb tips touch, the eyes are lowered toward the earth. The specific quality of presence that the statue has maintained for 750 years. The quality that every person who comes to it recognizes regardless of their specific relationship to the Buddhist tradition, regardless of what they knew about Kamakura before they arrived. This quality is here. It does not depend on the visitor for its quality. It is simply here. As the warrior tradition understood, as the Zen tradition practices, as the specific geography of Kamakura, the hills, the passes, the temples, the beach, the Pacific, has always made available to anyone who comes here with any degree of openness. You are here, in the specific dark of the night that has arrived over Kamakura. The hills are holding the city. The sea is doing what the sea does. The great Buddha is sitting in the valley, hands in lap, thumb tips touching, eyes lowered, in the specific quality of presence that this posture has been maintaining for 750 years. The practice is simple: the sitting, the breath, the specific quality of what is actually here, received without addition, without the overlay of what the mind fears or desires. What is actually here is this: the dark, the quiet, the specific weight of the body settling toward rest, the breath in, out. The hills hold everything. The sea is at the boundary. Beyond the boundary, the Pacific extends toward the horizon that the warriors of Kamakura looked at every day from the city they built in the hills. Beyond the horizon, nothing that needs your attention tonight. The specific quality of here is enough. Be here. Only here. As fully as the great Buddha is here. Which is completely. Which has always been completely. Which will be completely tomorrow. And tonight. And now. Sleep now. The specific quality of the Kamakura beach in the evening, when the day surfers have gone and the sand has cooled, and the specific light of the late afternoon is doing what the late afternoon light does to the Sagami Bay, is a quality that the people who live in Kamakura and who walk to the beach in the evenings describe as one of the specific reasons they live where they live. The light on the bay in the late afternoon is the specific light of a south-facing coast at that hour. The sun to the west, the light coming at an angle across the water rather than directly down into it, producing the specific quality of oblique illumination that reveals the texture of the sea surface in ways that the direct overhead light of noon does not reveal. The waves at this hour are the same waves as at noon, the same Pacific swells, arriving from the same general direction, breaking on the same beach with the same rhythm that the specific configuration of the Sagami Bay floor produces. But they look different. The oblique light makes the texture of the water visible, the specific patterns of the chop on the surface, the specific way that each wave builds and breaks, the specific quality of the foam as it runs up the sand and recedes. The surfers are gone, the beach is quiet, the hills are behind, the sea is in front. The light is doing what the light does in the specific hour before it fails. This is one of the specific gifts of living at the boundary between the hills and the sea. The hills hold the day's warmth after the sun has moved west. The sea gives back the specific light that the day has been building in it. The specific hour between the afternoon and the evening, the specific quality of the light in that hour, is available to whoever is on the beach to receive it. The warriors of Kamakura looked at this sea. From the beach, from the hills above the beach, from the specific viewpoints that the landscape of Kamakura provides. The hilltops from which the view extends south over the bay, east toward the Miura Peninsula, west toward the Izu Peninsula, north into the hills that surround the city. They looked at this sea every day. The sea that was the boundary of their world, beyond which there was China, from which the Zen tradition had arrived, from which the Mongol fleets would come, from which the specific knowledge that the Dutch and the Chinese traders would eventually bring through Nagasaki had not yet arrived. The horizon was the edge of what they knew, and they looked at it every day. The specific practice of looking at the horizon, of directing the gaze at the specific line where the known meets the unknown, where the organized world of the city ends and the unorganized world of the open Pacific begins, is itself a kind of practice. The specific practice of being present at the boundary between the known and the unknown. This is also what the breath is. The in-breath is the known, the breath that is arriving, that is entering the body, that the body can feel and attend to. The pause after the in-breath is the boundary, the specific moment between the in-breath and the out-breath, the specific quality of the pause that the Zen tradition teaches the practitioner to notice. The out-breath is the releasing, the breath leaving the body, moving into the space outside the body, becoming again the air that surrounds. And then another pause, the boundary between the out-breath and the in-breath, the specific quality of that pause, which is always there, which the ordinary mind, occupied with its concerns, does not notice, which the practice of sitting with the breath makes available to notice. The boundary between one breath and the next, between the known and the unknown, between the organized world of the city and the specific openness of the Pacific, between the day and the sleep. You're at this boundary now. The day is releasing. The sleep is approaching. The specific quality of the pause between them, the specific quality of this moment, this hour, this particular darkness, is here. The hills hold the city. The city holds its practice. The great Buddha sits in the valley. The sea is at the boundary, and you are here, at the boundary between the day and what comes after the day. The breath in, the pause out. The pause in, the hills, the sea, the specific quality of what is here, before the categories, before the concerns. Simply here. Sleep now. I'll see you in the next story.